Behind enormous hangar doors sits a machine capable of carrying hundreds of people through the sky at incredible speeds. Around it, engineers inspect every detail, pilots prepare for the journey, and millions of dollars in technology stand ready. But before this giant ever takes off, an extraordinary process begins. Every part of the aircraft has been designed with extraordinary precision. The engines alone represent years of engineering, and one mistake could turn a routine flight into a disaster. Now imagine that, among all these highly trained professionals, the one person who notices the problem is the man almost nobody pays attention to, the janitor. His name is Daniel Carter. Every morning, Daniel arrived before most of the engineers. He wore a simple gray uniform, carried a bucket and cleaning supplies, and quietly walked through the maintenance hangar. To most people, he was simply the man who cleaned the floors. Nobody asked for his opinion about aircraft. Nobody invited him into engineering meetings. And when important people walked through the hangar, Daniel usually stepped aside and allowed them to pass. But what almost nobody knew was that Daniel had spent most of his life around machines. Before becoming a janitor, he had worked around mechanical equipment and had developed an unusual ability to recognize small changes in sound, vibration, smell, and movement. He didn't have a prestigious engineering degree hanging on the wall, but he had something else: years of practical observation. The aircraft inside this story was an advanced, high-value military aircraft, estimated for the purposes of this fictional story at around $50 million. To understand why one tiny warning could matter so much, think about the difference between an ordinary machine and a modern aircraft. A car can often pull over when something goes wrong. An aircraft doesn't have that luxury once it is thousands of feet above the ground. Every engine vibration, hydraulic pressure, electrical signal, temperature reading, and mechanical movement can potentially tell a story about the aircraft's condition. That is why aviation maintenance is so strict. Certified technicians and inspectors are responsible for determining whether an aircraft is safe to fly. A janitor would normally have no authority to approve an aircraft for flight. In fact, aviation safety depends on trained personnel following documented inspection and maintenance procedures. But Daniel wasn't trying to replace the engineers. He simply noticed something that didn't look right. It happened on an ordinary morning. The hangar was unusually busy because the aircraft was scheduled for an important test flight. Engineers moved between computers and tool carts, while technicians performed final checks. The pilot arrived and began preparing for departure. Daniel was doing what he normally did, cleaning the floor near the aircraft. As he pushed his cleaning cart past the massive machine, he suddenly stopped. There was a faint metallic smell in the air. It wasn't strong enough for most people to notice, but Daniel had smelled something similar years earlier around industrial machinery. He looked toward the aircraft and noticed a tiny dark mark beneath one section of the fuselage. At first, it looked like nothing more than dirt or oil left behind by maintenance work. Daniel continued cleaning, but something bothered him. He came back and looked again. The mark appeared to be fresh. Daniel knew he couldn't simply walk into the engineering team and declare that the aircraft was dangerous, so instead he approached one of the technicians and quietly said, "Excuse me, could you take a look at this?" The technician glanced at the floor and laughed. He told Daniel that the aircraft had already gone through its inspections. Another engineer nearby agreed. According to the team, the aircraft was ready. Daniel didn't argue. He simply stepped back and continued working. But then he noticed something else. A few minutes later, while the aircraft's systems were being powered up, Daniel heard a faint rhythmic sound coming from beneath the aircraft. It was subtle, almost impossible to hear over the noise of the hangar, but the rhythm reminded him of a mechanical system that wasn't operating normally. The aircraft systems continued to come alive. Lights illuminated across the cockpit. Ground equipment was disconnected. The pilot prepared for the test. Daniel stood several meters away, watching. Then something happened that changed everything. A small amount of fluid appeared beneath the aircraft. The technician immediately noticed it this time. The area was secured and the engineering team began another inspection. What they discovered was not a catastrophic failure yet, but a developing problem in a critical system. If the aircraft had taken off without the issue being investigated, the consequences could potentially have been extremely serious. The exact component in this fictional story is intentionally simplified because real aircraft systems vary enormously, but the principle is real. A tiny leak, unusual vibration, abnormal sound, or unexplained residue can sometimes be the first visible clue that something needs attention. The engineers went back through their procedures. They inspected the surrounding components, checked connections, examined fluid lines, and reviewed maintenance records. Slowly, the mystery became clearer. A component that appeared normal during a quick visual inspection showed signs of abnormal wear. It wasn't something that Daniel could have repaired himself, and he certainly wasn't qualified to certify the aircraft. But his observation had done something incredibly important. It had caused the professionals to stop and look again. That distinction matters. Daniel didn't fix a $50 million aircraft with a mop and a toolbox. He did something much more realistic and, in aviation, extremely valuable. He noticed something unusual and reported it. The scheduled flight was delayed. The pilot was informed. Engineers continued investigating until they were satisfied that the aircraft met the required safety standards. For Daniel, there was no dramatic celebration at first. He simply returned to his cleaning cart. But later, one of the senior engineers approached him. He told Daniel that if he had not mentioned the strange smell and the mark on the floor, the team might not have focused on that area at that exact moment. The engineer didn't call Daniel a hero. Instead, he said something much more meaningful. "You did your job, and you did it well." Daniel smiled. He never expected recognition. He had simply learned to pay attention. And that's what makes this story powerful. In aviation, the glamorous roles are usually the pilots, engineers, designers, and test crews. We see the pilot sitting inside the cockpit. We see the engineer studying complicated diagrams. We see the aircraft taking off at incredible speed. But behind every successful flight is an enormous network of people whose names passengers may never know. Cleaners, ground crews, mechanics, inspectors, fuel technicians, dispatchers, baggage workers, safety teams, and countless others all contribute to the system. A modern aircraft is not kept in the sky by one person. It is kept safe through thousands of small actions performed correctly. There is also an important lesson here about how easily people judge others by their job titles. Daniel was a janitor, and some people assumed that meant he had nothing valuable to contribute to an aviation environment. But a job title doesn't measure someone's ability to observe, think, or care. At the same time, this story should not be misunderstood. In real aviation, unqualified people should never interfere with aircraft systems or attempt unauthorized repairs. Safety procedures exist for a reason. Daniel's value came from recognizing something unusual and reporting it to qualified professionals, not from bypassing the maintenance system. So, was Daniel really the man who saved a $50 million aircraft? In this fictional story, perhaps he was a person who noticed the warning sign before anyone else did. But the deeper truth is even more important. Sometimes the person standing closest to a problem isn't the person with the highest rank. Sometimes it's the person who spends every day quietly observing what everyone else has stopped noticing. The pilot may control the aircraft, the engineer may understand the system, the technician may repair the problem, but the person who says, "Wait, something doesn't look right," can be the reason everyone gets a chance to do their job before it's too late. And perhaps that is the lesson Daniel's story leaves behind. Never underestimate the person standing quietly in the background. The person cleaning the floor may notice the strange smell. The ground worker may hear the unusual sound. The mechanic may see the tiny crack. The inspector may catch the detail everyone else missed. In aviation, small details can matter enormously. And sometimes, the difference between an ordinary day and a disaster begins with one simple decision: someone paying attention. Daniel didn't need a title, a uniform covered in medals, or a seat in the cockpit. He simply needed to notice and have the courage to speak up. Because sometimes the person everyone ignores may be the very person who notices what everyone else missed. And that is why the next time you see someone doing a job that seems ordinary, remember, ordinary work can still require extraordinary attention.